I didn't feel joyful. I was scared. I was afraid. And it wasn't anxiety. They were like panic attacks,
Yeah.
which are different.
Hollywood called Goldie Hawn the happiest woman alive, the laugh, the sparkle, the eternal sunshine. But behind that image was a private reality few ever saw. Because throughout her career, Goldie quietly cut ties with some of the most powerful men in Hollywood and never explained why. No scandals, no public feuds, just roles abandoned, partnerships ended, and names she refused to share a room with. Now the stories behind those silent breaks are finally coming together, revealing how Hollywood's brightest smile was shaped by moments the public was never meant to see. And the first clash began with a comedy legend who crossed a line in front of an entire room. The moment that insiders still whisper about didn't happen on a film set or in front of cameras. It happened in a quiet conference room during what was supposed to be a routine table read. By the late 80s, Goldie Hawn was already one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, warm, precise, and famously prepared. So when she arrived early, script marked and ready, no one thought twice. Then the door swung open. He walked in, late, loud, and completely unapologetic, Bill Murray, already known for unpredictable genius and off-camera chaos. People expected eccentricity. They didn't expect what came next. He dropped into his chair, skimmed the pages, and within minutes started interrupting the read. Jokes over dialogue, sarcastic asides. Then, mid-scene, he stopped everything and looked straight at Goldie. Maybe try it like you're not in a sitcom. The room laughed. For a split second, she didn't react. No comeback, no defense, just stillness. Then she quietly closed her script, stood up, and walked out. No explanation, no scene, just silence. The kind that lands harder than shouting. By the next morning, producers got the message. She was gone. No negotiation, no press drama. Just a clean exit from a major studio comedy that had been built around her. People assumed it was a scheduling conflict. It wasn't, because from that day forward, Goldie began turning down projects with volatile male leads, especially ones celebrated for edgy behavior. Friends noticed the shift immediately. She stopped chasing big ensemble comedies and started choosing smaller, safer productions. Peace over prestige. And whenever Murray's name surfaced, her response stayed the same, polite, final, and immovable. No interest. But that wasn't the only time a powerful man reacted badly to Goldie refusing to play along. And the next story cut much deeper, because it didn't just cost her a role, it nearly cost her an entire era of her career. By the late 1970s, Goldie Hawn was everywhere. Box office hits, magazine covers, awards buzz. She wasn't just successful, she was adored. And that kind of spotlight inevitably drew attention from Hollywood's most influential men. One of them was Warren Beatty. At the time, Beatty wasn't just a star, he was power. Films revolved around him, careers accelerated around him, and his reputation as Hollywood's ultimate charmer was legendary. When he set his sights on someone, people assumed the outcome was inevitable. So when he began inviting Goldie into his circle, private dinners, exclusive parties, quiet one-on-one invitations, no one thought twice. It was the kind of attention actresses were expected to welcome. Goldie didn't. She stayed warm, friendly, and unmistakably firm. No flirtation, no encouragement, no blurred lines, just professional distance. And according to long-circulating industry stories, that's when the tone shifted. Projects that had seemed certain suddenly stalled. Scripts she'd been promised moved forward without her. Meetings cooled. One producer quietly warned her that Beatty had described her as difficult and not serious material. In Hollywood language, that was damaging. Rumors suggest the change wasn't explosive, It was subtle, strategic. Doors didn't slam, they simply stopped opening. Goldie never confronted him publicly. She never confirmed any campaign against her, but people close to her later said she viewed that period as a turning point, the moment she realized how easily power could reshape perception. Years later, at an industry event, they crossed paths again. Beatty greeted her with his usual charm, as if nothing had ever happened. She smiled politely, listened for a moment, then turned away mid-conversation. No scene, no words, just a quiet refusal to engage. Because by then, she already understood something few outsiders see. In Hollywood, rejection doesn't always end a romance. Sometimes it starts a rivalry. And the next man on her private list didn't just bruise her career, he challenged her talent to her face. By the early 1980s, Goldie Hawn was determined to change how Hollywood saw her. For years, studios had leaned on her bubbly image, the blonde, the laugh, the lightness. It made money, but it also boxed her in, and Goldie wanted out. So when a serious drama opposite Dustin Hoffman landed on her desk, it felt like the opportunity she'd been waiting for. Hoffman was respected, intense, and known for elevating projects into prestige territory. If she could prove herself beside him, the industry might finally see her range. The audition was private, stripped down, and high stakes. Producers watched closely as they began reading together. At first, it seemed promising, focused, controlled, emotionally grounded. Goldie leaned into the role with restraint instead of charm. Then, halfway through the scene, Hoffman stopped. Not gently, not constructively. He turned to the producers and, according to accounts repeated for years in industry circles, said flatly that she was still playing it like television. The implication hung heavy in the room. She wasn't serious enough, not deep enough, not real enough. The comment landed harder because it came publicly, in front of decision-makers whose opinions could define her future. Goldie didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply finished the scene, steady, professional, composed. Then she thanked everyone and walked out. The next morning, she withdrew from consideration. No campaign, no lobbying, no attempt to win the role back. Just another quiet exit. People close to her later suggested that moment cut deeper than any on-set conflict. It wasn't about personality or ego, it was about respect, about being dismissed before she'd even been given space to prove herself. She never worked with Hoffman, never pursued another collaboration, and when asked years later about male co-stars who overstepped, she offered a line that insiders still connect to that audition. Some men forget they're not directing the women around them. It was calm, measured, and unmistakably pointed. But even that humiliation happened behind closed doors. The next fracture on her list played out in full view of cameras, during a film that looked like a dream pairing and ended as a lasting grudge. On paper, it should have been perfect. Goldie Hawn, America's most beloved comedic actress, paired with Chevy Chase, the sharpest new face of irreverent humor. Studios expected lightning in a bottle, and at the box office, that's exactly what they got. But behind the scenes, people who worked on the film later described a very different atmosphere. Chase's style thrived on improvisation and disruption. He bent dialogue, changed timing, pushed scenes off script. Directors often tolerated it because it produced laughs, but sources from the production claimed the behavior didn't stay playful. It turned competitive. Whenever Goldie landed a bigger reaction during rehearsals or test screenings, tension followed. Comments slipped out under his breath, jokes with an edge, moments where he'd stall takes or push for rewrites that shifted attention back toward him. Goldie, known for smoothing conflict with humor, initially tried to keep things light. She joked between takes, adjusted rhythm, gave space. But sources from the production say the strain grew visible as filming progressed. Conversations shortened, eye contact faded. One night, after a dispute over a scene's direction, Chase reportedly walked off set, refusing to continue until changes were made. Production paused. Crew waited. Goldie stayed behind on the soundstage steps, quiet and drained. Someone later recalled her saying softly that he wasn't funny when the cameras stopped, just unkind. By the time shooting wrapped, the distance between them was unmistakable. Promotions were cordial but cool, interviews carefully separate. And when studio executives pushed for a sequel, a major payday, guaranteed success, Goldie declined immediately. No hesitation, no renegotiation. It surprised executives at the time, but to her, the decision was simple. No success was worth repeating that dynamic. From then on, she avoided reuniting with Chase entirely, even as his career continued to rise. Their brief partnership remained frozen in that one film, commercially huge, personally final. And if that experience taught her anything, it was that disrespect didn't always hide behind closed doors, because the next man on her list delivered it in public, in front of an entire room, and reduced decades of work to a single stereotype. By 2014, Goldie Hawn had long stepped beyond the bubbly image that launched her career. She was an Oscar winner, producer, and mental health advocate. So when she spoke at a Malibu charity gala about emotional resilience, it wasn't celebrity talk, it was personal work she believed in. Most of the room listened closely, but witnesses later said one table didn't. Seated there was Penn, known for blunt opinions. During her speech, he reportedly showed visible impatience, shifting, sighing, reacting audibly enough for nearby guests to notice. Then came the moment people remembered. After polite applause, Penn allegedly leaned back and made a remark suggesting she should stick to what made her famous, laughter and lightness, instead of serious topics. The comment wasn't shouted, but it carried far enough to reach her. Goldie didn't react. No expression change, no confrontation. She simply finished, thanked the hosts, and left early. Friends later said that moment lingered because it echoed a stereotype she'd spent decades fighting, that she was only valuable when cheerful and decorative. After that night, she quietly avoided events where Penn was expected. No feud, no headlines, just distance. When asked years later about people she chose not to be around, she offered a calm final phrase, "Not my energy." And the last name on her private list came from an earlier Hollywood era, a legend who, without realizing it, made her feel small in a room she'd earned. When she appeared on a panel beside Kirk Douglas, it was meant to be a meeting of equals, two generations of Hollywood success sharing a stage. It didn't feel that way to her. When he greeted her, Douglas reportedly leaned into his old-school charm, kissing her hand and complimenting how she hadn't aged. The audience laughed warmly, Goldie smiled politely, but insiders later said the tone was set in that instant. She was being framed as timeless beauty, not accomplished peer. As the discussion continued, observers claimed he interrupted her repeatedly, finishing thoughts, correcting points, redirecting attention back to himself. Not aggressively, just habitually, the way legends sometimes dominate rooms without noticing. But people watching sensed the shift. Goldie's bright engagement cooled into stillness. She spoke less, listened more, waited for space that rarely came. Afterward, she confided to a friend that he still saw her as the young blonde from beach comedy days, not the Oscar-winning producer she'd become. That disconnect, she felt, erased decades of growth in a single conversation. She remained cordial with his son, praising him often, but she never again mentioned Kirk publicly. No criticism, no complaint, just absence. Because sometimes the deepest slight isn't cruelty, it's being politely overlooked by someone who never realizes you've changed. And by then, Goldie's quiet list was complete. But the real question isn't who was on it, it's why she never revealed it. By the time Goldie Hawn reached the peak of her career, she had already learned a rule that wasn't written anywhere, but shaped everything. In Hollywood, speaking out can cost more than staying quiet. The pattern around her conflicts was striking. No public feuds, no tell-all interviews, no retaliation. She simply stepped away from projects, partnerships, events, even entire circles. To outsiders, it looked peaceful. To insiders, it looked strategic. Because the men she distanced herself from weren't minor figures. They were bankable stars, influential decision-makers, cultural icons. Challenging them openly in past decades could brand an actress as difficult overnight, a label that quietly shut doors faster than any scandal. So Goldie chose something rarer, controlled silence. Instead of fighting reputations, she redirected her career. She produced her own projects, selected safer collaborators, and built spaces where she had creative authority. Friends later suggested that approach wasn't avoidance, it was survival with dignity. And there was another layer. Goldie's public identity had always been warmth, joy, light. If she suddenly exposed conflicts or named grievances, it would fracture the very persona audiences loved. The industry often punishes women not just for anger, but for contradicting the image people expect from them. So she kept the stories private, the boundaries firm but invisible. Which is why decades later, the fragments that surfaced about those relationships felt surprising, not because conflict existed, but because she had carried it so quietly. And in the end, that silence may have shaped her legacy more than any feud ever could. Because behind the laughter everyone remembers, there was a woman constantly choosing peace over power. For most audiences, Goldie Hawn will always be the same image: laughter, sparkle, effortless joy, the woman who made happiness look easy. But the stories that slowly surfaced across decades reveal something more complex, a performer navigating an industry that often mistook warmth for weakness. Again and again, she faced the same pattern, being underestimated, interrupted, redirected, reduced to an image she had already outgrown. Sometimes it came as open mockery, sometimes charm, sometimes quiet dismissal. Different men, different moments, the same undertone. Yet her response never matched the hostility. She didn't scorch reputations or chase vindication. She adjusted course, walked away, built safer creative spaces, protected her peace long before that phrase became common language. That choice shaped everything that followed. Her later career slowed but steadied. Her public presence softened into mentorship and advocacy. And the persona people saw, calm, grounded, self-assured, wasn't naive optimism. It was resilience refined over years of private friction. Which reframes the question entirely. Maybe the surprise isn't that she kept distance from certain men. Maybe it's that she did it without bitterness becoming her identity. In an industry fueled by ego and confrontation, she chose quiet boundaries instead of public battles. So the smile the world remembers wasn't denial, it was decision. A decision to stay warm in a place that often rewarded hardness, to remain light without being small, to leave rooms that didn't see her clearly and build ones that did. And once you understand that, her silence stops looking mysterious. It looks intentional.